2017 was a year in the win column for gaming. Sure, some bad things happened, but forget about those. If we're looking at a purely release standpoint, it was one of the greatest years in a long time. One release in particular had hordes of people saying it's a contender for possibly the greatest game of all time. I mean, with that release alone, you could call 2017 a great year. But we had dozens of other great games. But 2018 has started, so that means another YouTuber with a highly inflated sense of self gets to tell you their favorite games of the previous year. I'm Colin from Power Moose, and let's get this show started. Snake Pass really is something else, which is almost the best way to describe the game. From the moment this game starts, you see all the colors, you hear the soundtrack, and it takes you right back to the 90s, back when all games starred animals. But this time, it's in high def. But it's not the looks or the sounds that set this game apart from everything else on the market. It's the controls, the moment-to-moment gameplay. In this game, it's not really a surprise that you're controlling a snake. Do you know any other game where you control as a snake? I mean, other than the game Snake. And I don't even know if that's supposed to be a real snake. This game isn't your typical left analog means go and X is jump, the stuff we've seen forever. It controls in a way that's best described as realistic. You literally have to move like a snake, something that I've heard so many times, I can't begin to explain how much it started to annoy me. But it's true. You have to slither around properly, wrap yourself around objects so you can climb up them, all to get those sweet gems. I think they were gems anyway. It's been a long time since I played. To get down to it, the reason I liked this game as much as I did was it stood out against the crowd. It was different. In an industry dominated with the mentality of let's just try to make the most popular thing, it's really appreciated to see a studio go, we just want to make a game about a snake. Housemarque has done it again. With the help of veteran game creator Eugene Jarvis and a banging soundtrack from Avi Pulkkinen, someone whose name I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, we're given the amazing experience Nex Machina, a twin-stick shoot-'em-up using a significantly enhanced version of their engine and voxel tech that they used for Resogun, and that game was already pretty cool. I can't begin to explain how fun this game is. I hopped onto this game a few days ago just to grab some footage for this video, and then I completely lost track of time. I was only going to play for a few minutes and ended up playing for over an hour, and that's not something that happens to me very often. It goes without saying, the strongest aspect of this game is the soundtrack. It's just listen to it. Now, if that doesn't make you feel like you can save the world, I don't think anything can. On top of just being old school fun, this game scratches a weird perfectionist itch I've always had when it comes to gaming. Sure, you could just beat the game, but did you find all the secrets? Did you save all the humans? Did you collect everything in one run? The game is built from the ground up to be played over and over, to get better and better with each run. And with multiple difficulty settings, you can easily sink a ton of time into this game, just like I did when it came out. What Remains of Edith Finch is another game in the seemingly increasing trend of quote-unquote walking simulators. But where personally I feel many of those games fail, What Remains of Edith Finch succeeds. Most games in this genre tend to solely focus on the story, and personally, out of the ones I've played, a lot of them are not worth it. Now, I won't lie, the story in this game isn't out of this world amazing. It certainly won't have you yelling to the heavens for a sequel. However, something the story does right is it doesn't really have one story. It has several. The overarching story of Edith learning about her family never feels too dragged out, because in this you don't read the story on notes left around the environment like in other games. You get to experience the story of each family member firsthand in its own unique world and gameplay that each never overstay their welcome. Now, like I said earlier, a large chunk of the gameplay is just walking from story to story, but when you spend so much time walking around such a fantastical house, you come to see that it's essentially its own character, and you can learn just as much about the past from looking around the environment as you can from playing through the story segments. That being said, the gameplay changes up the formula entirely from each story, so no two are alike. While some are not as strong as others, some I thought were really fantastic. After 12 long years, Resident Evil is back with a decent survival horror game. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, winner of my Best Title Design Award, takes us back to the survival horror roots of the earlier games in the franchise, and it does a fantastic job at that. Any fan of this series knows that it's not just the survival horror element that makes these games what they are, but it's also how goofy they are. It's not taking themselves too seriously, and while Resident Evil 7 might be the scariest game in the series, I think it might be the goofiest too, and that's not exactly an easy feat. This is a series where you fought an invisible snake, a T-Rex, and Lindsay Lohan. This game does a lot of what I call going full anime, which I understand might not be as straightforward as I want to think it is. It's hard to explain. It makes more sense, I guess, if you've watched anime. But basically, it's just really cool, kind of over-the-top action, but still silly. Having a chainsaw duel with Cletus from The Simpsons is what I would call going full anime. This game is full of that dumb stuff, and I love it. And when I say dumb, I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean like B-movie dumb, like it's enjoyable. Resident Evil 7 captures the perfect balance of being tense and a little scary, but making me laugh at the same time. It's a really odd mix, but it totally works. I can't talk about this game without bringing up the Bakers, the antagonists of this game. I love this family. They're easily some of my favorite characters in all of Resident Evil. Not that Resident Evil has had great choices of characters. Despite being horrible monsters, the Bakers somehow retain their southern charm. Because of this, you sort of feel for these characters, even though all they do is try to murder you. Minus the whole murder thing, I see my parents in Jack and Marguerite, and I'm sure my parents would love to hear that. If for some reason you've never played a Resident Evil game, now is the time to jump in. This game visually looks fantastic, it plays really well, and has PSVR support, so you can get even more immersed in the experience if that's your kind of thing. Don't worry about being lost in the plot or anything like that. Despite it being called Resident Evil 7, it's barely connected to the rest of the series. Though for you lore nerds out there, there are some hints in there through the base game, and the DLC does a much better job of connecting. If you like this game and you're wondering, should I buy the DLC? Do yourself a favor and at least get the End of Zoe DLC. It put a smile on my face like no game has ever done. Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Anyone who knows me well enough isn't at all surprised that an Uncharted game is on my best of the year list. I can't help it. I've always loved this series, and shockingly, this game is no different. That being said, The Lost Legacy is a little different from the past games, where it adds a sort of open-world sandboxy area, but it does the right thing and keeps that to only one chapter of the game. On the gameplay front, nothing has really changed since Uncharted 4, which is fine. That game had only come out a year prior, and seeing as I liked Uncharted 4 a lot, having more of the same was fine by me. What really makes The Lost Legacy stand apart from the rest of the Uncharted series are the characters. While I've always loved Nathan Drake, he is sort of a paint-by-numbers, please-everyone type of character, while Chloe and Nadine are real people. Throughout The Lost Legacy, Chloe and Nadine are on a very Uncharted-like journey on a search for treasure. Now, Chloe and Nadine don't exactly like each other a whole lot, but slowly grow to enjoy each other's company, and their relationship is kind of what drives this game. We get a lot of two dudes do a thing the video game, but we never really get to see gal pals save the day, and that's something that sets it apart from not just the Uncharted series, but a lot of games out there. There isn't really a whole lot more I can say about this game. If you like Uncharted, you'll like The Lost Legacy. If you've never played an Uncharted game, this is a pretty good spot to jump in. It's got some cool mechanics, fun characters, and it's not too attached to the rest of the series that you'll be confused. Yakuza Kiwami is a great HD remake of the first Yakuza game. Now, I don't really know to what extent things were redone behind the scenes for the release of this game, but I know one thing for sure. This don't look like no PS2 game, that's for sure. The Yakuza series has never really been a huge hit over here in the West. Granted, after many years, that's finally starting to change. I feel fairly confident a lot of people watching this have never even heard of the series, and there's 17 of them. The fastest way to explain these games would be think RPG Grand Theft Auto Japan. Now, I haven't played Grand Theft Auto in probably 10 years, and this is the only Yakuza game I've actually played, so with my limited knowledge of both of those, I'll say that description doesn't exactly do Yakuza justice. The tone of Yakuza is almost having an identity crisis of the best kind. The main plot of the game focuses on things like murder, corruption, and a stolen 10 billion yen. And yeah, the Yakuza. Lots and lots of Yakuza. Stuff that's, pretty serious. But almost all of the side quests and a lot of the things around Kamurocho are filled to the brim with wacky Japanese humor that I get might not be for everyone, but it's certainly the type of stuff that makes me laugh. So if you just want a crime thriller, great, just play through the story. If you just like the humor in the game, skip the cutscenes, ignore the story, and just goof around in the city for a while. At its core, Yakuza Kiwami is a fairly small game, and I mean that in terms of map size. Where most games in this genre would be an entire city, Yakuza Kiwami is only a couple of blocks. But these blocks are dripping with things to do. If we're talking content per square foot, I think this game has a lot of game speed. There's a constant stream of goons to beat up, countless restaurants to check out, and a ton of mini-games around every corner that's surely to please almost anyone. You could go play some pool, head to the batting cages, go bowling, or everyone's favorite, karaoke. Now, the combat in Yakuza is unlike anything else I've played. It's not so unfamiliar that you can't figure it out, but it took me a long time, honestly. But the part that I got right away is easily the best part of the combat, and that's the heat moves. They're super simple to pull off, and they're always fun to watch. So even when you're not very good at the game, pulling off these heat moves makes you feel like a real Yakuza. There's also a ton of these. Just hand-to-hand combat probably has a couple dozen, and then every weapon seems to have one or two on top of that, so you'll never get tired of watching them. And I just never get tired of a Japanese man in a business suit doing wrestling moves on street thugs. Now, I can't talk about the Yakuza series without talking about the characters. Mainly the 2 stars. Almost everyone else is kind of forgettable. Which, when something has this many characters and only 2 of note, that sounds like it might be a problem, But with Yakuza, trust me, it's really not. The main character, Kazuma Kiryu, and what I guess you'd call his lifelong rival, Goro Majima, are such strong characters, everyone else is irrelevant. These two, I hate to say this, but are kind of like Japanese Batman and Joker. While Kiryu has a heart of gold underneath several rough layers and an incredibly cold exterior, Majima, on the other hand, isn't that at all. He's a complete sociopath, and everybody knows it. If I could, I would keep talking about Yakuza until I'm blue in the face. There's so much I haven't touched on. Even though this series is a little over 12 years old, there's never been a better time to be a Yakuza fan. With this remake of the first game, a remake of the second game around the corner, and the prequel game Yakuza 0 that was released last year, there's a ton of great content ready and waiting for you in Kamurocho. Before I move on, I want to get to my honorable mentions, even though we still have 2 games to go, and I'll explain more why at the end. These titles are games that I enjoyed, but for various reasons felt they weren't quite up to snuff to be on a proper list. But I enjoyed them enough that I felt I should mention them somewhere. Slain Back from Hell is an action platformer with a gothic metal theme and some stellar pixel art. And that's about it, really. The combat is decent and has a fun feeling parry system, but all of it's nothing too complex. The story is, who cares? I honestly forgot if I had trouble following along or if I was so uninterested that I just stopped paying attention. With that being said, there's something about this game that struck a chord with me. It's a video game, and I get the feeling it's not trying to be anything else. It's not trying to be some crazy over-the-top art piece. It's just trying to be a game. It brings me back to my youth of playing things like Super Castlevania. Now, this game certainly isn't that, but if you're looking for a game to just turn your brain off and enjoy the nostalgia trip, pick this game up. Divinity Original Sin is a game I would call contextually amazing, which is probably an odd thing to hear for a game that didn't technically make my list for best of the year. Let me explain. This game is a super in-depth, turn-based RPG where it feels like almost anything is possible, and in my experience, it pretty much was. Think playing D&D with your friends, the video game. That's what Divinity is. If you want to pickpocket someone, have a friend talk to that NPC and keep them busy while you take whatever you want. You see some folks standing in a puddle? Zap it with lightning and kill them all. When a few friends of mine pitched the game to me this way, I was sold immediately. So, when my girlfriend and I sat down to give this game a go, we played it for hours, and I do believe it was probably the most fun I've had gaming in a really long time. Certainly the best of 2017. So, how can a game I love this much not make my list? Well, when I later decided to give this game a shot playing solo, I was miserable. I don't know what it was, but there's some sort of magic released when you play this game in co-op, especially local couch co-op. I forgot how much I had missed that. Whatever it was, all of that was completely drained when I was alone. For that reason, I felt like I can't, in good faith, put this game on my list. It needs to be enjoyable all of the time, not just in certain situations, so I'm sorry, Divinity. you didn't quite make the cut, but hopefully I'll feel different about the sequel. So the reason I wanted to get my honorable mentions out here was because we've reached the top. My top 2 favorite games of 2017. These 2 have changed places with each other close to a dozen times while I was making this list, and then a dozen more while I was making this video. For all intents and purposes, my top 2 games are tied. But I wasn't happy with a tie. I had to pick both of them apart to the bone until I picked an actual winner. So with that out of the way, let's get to our runner-up. My second favorite game of 2017.
You never see it coming. You see that my mind is the best for us.
Persona 5. If I were a betting man, I would have put it all on this game not being on my list. Not so much because I thought it was hot garbage, but just because up until November of 2017, I just didn't care about it at all. I knew it and my friends knew it. I wasn't going to pick this game up. I just wasn't interested. But eventually, as you can see, I caved. And boy, am I glad I did. To the people out there who kept telling me how great this game is, you the real MVP. If I could say this any other way, I would. But to put it bluntly, Persona 5 is design porn. It has put so much work into menus of this game that nothing I've played even comes remotely close to doing it this well. Just look at these menus. Remarkable. In Persona 5, you're going to be spending the bulk of the game in various menus, be it sorting out equipment, buying items, talking to pals, or just good old-fashioned fisticuffs. So to see a game put this much effort into menu design and layout as the big studios do tightening the graphics on level 9,
Hey guys, finished testing that game yet? I've got another one I need designed.
We just finished level 3 and need to tighten up the graphics a little bit.
Great.
it's a level of appreciation I never knew was possible until now. While the actual graphics or model quality in this game isn't fantastic, everything is done with so much style and flair that no one has time to care. Persona 5, like the rest of them, or I assume anyway, I've never played any of them, is one part JRPG, one part collect-a-thon, one part dating game, and a little dash of real-life simulator. In this game, you play as a student of Shujin Academy. While you're trying to save the day, you also have to juggle your day-to-day life, like going to school, working a part-time job, and having an actual social life. The JRPG part of this game is honestly nothing special, but because of how all of the pieces of this game fit together, it really doesn't have to be great. It's your standard turn-based affair, hack away at the monsters or cast magic spells, the stuff you expect to see in this genre. But it's the integration with the dating and social aspect of the game that makes it different from any RPG I've ever played. In this game, while you're not forced to hang out with your friends and party members, it becomes highly advised, because the more characters like you, the better the perks you get in battle or throughout various areas in the game. Now, I keep calling this a dating sim because you can date all the ladies. Well, almost all. But there's really only one that's the right answer. Sadly, if you want to date a fella, you can't. Sorry, Ryuji, my sweet, sweet boy. But at least you can hang out with them as much as you'd like. Going into this game, I thought for sure the social stuff was going to be a nightmare to deal with, having to drag my feet through it in between fighting the bad guys. But that didn't end up being the case. It slowly and surely became my favorite part of this game. Each character has their own side stories that you can learn all about through spending time with them, and pretty much all of them are interesting, at least the ones I've actually completed. One thing I have to mention with this game is its soundtrack. Much like its effort into its design, Persona 5's soundtrack is unlike anything I've heard. I struggled to find a good word for it, but I guess you could say it's kinda jazzy. The music, when you're just hanging out or going to school, is kinda classy, but then the music when you're fighting really knows how to get you pumped up. It's a really good mix. Now, a lot of you probably don't know this, but I'm not a music guy, especially not a video game music guy. I don't know why, it's just never been my thing. It's incredibly rare that I listen to a soundtrack outside of when I'm actually playing the game. There are maybe 10 games whose soundtracks I think are worth mentioning, so when I say Persona 5 soundtrack is up there with the best of them, you can take that to the bank. The only warning I would give for this game isn't exactly a bad thing. This game is going to take time. A lot of time. As of me recording this, I have a little over 100 hours into this game, and I can tell I still have a little bit to go before the ending, and a lot more to go if I want to 100% it. This is a rare game that when someone says it's a 100-hour RPG, they mean it. Well, we've reached the end of my list. There's only one game left. I'm sure a lot of people can probably figure out what it might be based on things I've said throughout the year, or posts I've made on Twitter, or you just saw what games I've been playing, or saw what game I was streaming to get footage for this video. So, if you don't know what game this will be, get ready. If you do know, X surprise anyway. After a whole lot of thought and arguing with myself, I've decided that Horizon Zero Dawn is the best game I played in 2017. From the moment I first laid eyes on some early concept art for this game, when it was leaked almost a year before the game was officially shown off, I was sold. It was a level of hype and excitement I hadn't felt for a game in ages, possibly ever. And at that time, I didn't even know if this game would ever come to be. But just look at this. When you see these sort of tribal people fighting off a giant robot dinosaur with bows and spears, who wouldn't get excited by this? If you can look at this image and not think, golly, I want some of that, you might be a psychopath. Fast forward a little over 2 years and I finally have this game in my hands, and I quickly fell in love. There were two leading factors as to why Horizon eventually won out over Persona 5. The first one being, just look at this game. It's beyond gorgeous. I don't just mean impressive graphically, but the world itself is full of all these little details that tell the story of what took place in the past. Horizon Zero Dawn, despite the fact I'd probably be dead in minutes, has a world I would love to see firsthand. Post-apocalyptic has never looked so pretty. You can easily forget the tragedies that took place here when you see some of the vistas in this game. I would almost say you could throw any combat or plot out the window and just have Aloy trying to avoid getting killed by the machines while you explore this world. I would still pick this game up. Luckily, this game still has both combat and plot, because both of those things were outstanding. The story of Horizon Zero Dawn sort of has three pillars to it, and while I certainly like some of them more than others, each of them are still really solid. First off, we have Aloy and her personal journey to learn about her own past, which is really the driving narrative of this game. Then, of course, you have the actual plot of what's happening in the world itself. And finally, there's the history of the world itself, which I think is my favorite of the three. Now, maybe it's not as rare as I think it is, but I really like that this plot isn't relying on Aloy to be the hero and save the day. It doesn't really involve her all that much. It feels like it's just the natural progression of things, and you just happen to get involved with it. Horizon Zero Dawn is a rare piece of media that I would really appreciate a sequel and a prequel. While the basics of the past are revealed to you through the main campaign, the meaty tidbits of it are hidden all around the world. Learning about what had happened between our modern day as we know it and the time that this game takes place was so interesting to me that it was a personal mission of mine as a player to get my hands on any detail about it that I could. Now, given that Guerrilla Games has a history with making shooter titles, I don't think it's entirely out of the question that we see some sort of shooter prequel to this game, but I'm not going to hold my breath. It's just wishful thinking. Horizon's combat might be its strongest aspect, and it's what ultimately made me choose this over Persona 5. This is a best video game list. And the thing that makes games unique from, say, movies or books is its gameplay. This is a game that is just a blast to play. Now, when I played through this game, it didn't have a difficulty setting, and because of that, the difficulty scaling was handled beautifully. Something many games fumble with. It's a game that, while leveling up can help you, it's ultimately maybe 10% of the fight. The rest is all on you. Even when I was just going through this game at max level, if I wasn't keeping an eye out, I was gonna get trampled. And for me, while there is a time and a place for relaxing, simple gameplay, for the most part, I like to be challenged, and this game has that in spades. If you're looking for a game with an interesting narrative that's easy on the eyes and acres of fun to play, I can't recommend Horizon Zero Dawn enough. And with the recent addition of the fantastic Frozen Wilds DLC, you've got a ton of game to play in front of you. Well, that's it. There you have it. Those are the best games that I played in 2017. Hopefully, if you're looking for a game to play, you take my recommendations, because all of these games I had a pretty good time with. If Let's Plays are your thing, I've played through a few of these games on this channel before, and you should totally go check them out. I should also say, I've never made a video like this, and was really surprised at how much work goes into it. So if you like this video, give it a like, or just leave a message. I'm sure I'll read it. Even if you don't like it, tell me why. I'm not a great writer, and I'm not a great speaker, so why I chose to make a video like this at all, I'll never know. But the only way I can improve on them is with feedback. And if you've actually made it this far into the video, thanks for watching. It really does mean a lot to me.